This is the hardest part, getting out and getting going from a warm tent into this absolute blizzard. There's virtually no visibility.
Literally overnight, blue sky disappeared and we're now completely enveloped in a whiteout.
The wind will be on our side again, at least it's not in our face, but we are continuing to drift east, which could be our undoing.
We're a race against the clock at the moment. We need just a lot of luck. And this is what the Arctic has become. It's more storms, lots of snow, and lots of open water. This is one of the many ways we ferry across these leads. We probably have to do many, many crossings right now, and we need to be more efficient and quick.
So we've been island hopping. This is about the third island we've got onto. The first one we swam across, managed to cross via a frozen block to the second, then stepped onto the third via a very narrow crack, and we're teetering here on the edge of what appears to be an abyss into the water.
And we're stopped again because right in front of us is water, and we're kind of uncertain if we can get to the other side. And things are cracking and moving. It's not really super safe to be here. It's so worth protecting what remaining ice we still have. And we really have to start changing our behavior with fossil fuels, because otherwise this will be all water really soon.
If you can imagine what it would be like to lose all the mountains in the world, or all the deserts, or all the lakes, or all the rivers, it's just the same kind of analogy. Once it's gone, it's gone.
That's impressive, huh? Yeah. That was 2014. And I was attempting to ski from the North Pole back to Canada. 800 kilometers. And we had to get rescued. 80 kilometers before we were there. I could see the coast. I could see land, but I wasn't able to get there because we were drifting fast. 175 kilometers, one direction, towards the east, to Greenland. Had we not called a rescue, I probably wouldn't have stand here to talk to you, because we would have been absorbed into the wide open Atlantic Ocean, and nobody would have been able to get to us. So I did the right thing. I'm still very sad about that expedition, to be honest. It's 4 years ago, and I am the last polar explorer who has been able to do that journey. No one since then has been able to do such a big expedition. So I'm unemployed. Anybody got a job? Yeah. But I put my knowledge to good use because I care about that place. See if that will work here. Yes, it does. I care about the North Pole so much that I call myself the ambassador for the North Pole. I mean, somebody got to do it. And this is where we see the change happening the fastest. In the Arctic, it was already 7 degrees warmer than the rest of the planet. And we know that we humans are contributing to this problem. We know that because of all our CO2 we emit in the atmosphere, our planet is warming up. In fact, it's never been more concentration of CO2 in the atmosphere as today. We're now measuring so much CO2 in the atmosphere that we really are wondering what is going to happen, because the last time we had more than 400 parts per million CO2 in the atmosphere, we weren't here. We humans weren't around. And so despite all our intentions, our conventions, our climate conferences, our CO2 keeps on rising. And then we look at our history. This is what geologists do. They go back and see if they can find a pattern as to, are there some lessons to be learned? Is there some grasp of hope that perhaps it is something that is natural, that maybe we shouldn't be so worried about climate change because it all will even out eventually? But take a look at this picture. The trend shows something completely different. Sure, every 100,000 years we have an ice age. We know exactly what causes that. But what is it doing? It's going the other way. Despite the fact that we should be really going into an ice age right now, we're seeing the reverse. It's getting hotter and hotter. And so for me, I look at the Arctic. And I'm seeing, of course, first through expeditions, but I'm also studying the science, and I see what's going on. And we are losing a lot of ice, and fast. Today, there is 40% less ice on the North Pole in the Arctic than in 1979 when we first started measuring the Arctic ice cap, because that was the first year we were able to get satellites over the Arctic. So 40% less ice, which is approximately the size of all of Europe together. You don't have to be a scientist to really understand that that has to have an impact somewhere. Somebody somewhere is going to suffer because of that. And yes, you see, it comes back and it sort of bounces around, but the trend is down. And then the other thing that is concerning, I'm mentioning 3 things that are happening in the Arctic. So you have a little bit of understanding of what science is, or what we're doing, or try to understand there, is the thickness of the ice. My first expedition to the North Pole was exactly 10 years ago, 2017. I was skiing on ice that was approximately 2.5 to 3 meters thick. There is no ice like that anymore. All the ice, at the moment, 95% of it, forms in September and melts again, roughly in March. The months that the ice can grow has become less and less. It starts later and it melts much faster. And so the Arctic simply doesn't have a chance to grow healthy. And what is worrying here is not just that we have not very thick ice, it affects the entire biodiversity under the ice. It has consequences for plankton, it has consequences for krill, it has consequences for seals and polar bears. All of those animals that can only live by the mercy of these things being intact. And you take one element out of it, such as plankton, who can't live in daylight, who needs to be in darkness, then you can see that the whole ecosystem will dismantle. Sun rays will penetrate through the ice, warms up the ice underneath it, and starts eating away, eroding away the layer underneath. And that's something we can't see from satellites. Just like now, all the news about Antarctica. All of a sudden, these big plates break off. We didn't see it coming because we don't see it. But it is happening. And the third thing that is concerning in the Arctic is a change of pressure systems. When I was skiing in the Arctic in 2017, it was always bad weather. Well, 2 years before that, I needed to use a lot of sunscreen. It was always sunny. So change in pressure systems means also that we start to see hurricanes at the North Pole. Never seen that before. We're now all experts since last year. We've seen a whole bunch coming, Harvey, Irma, Maria. Now we have hurricanes right at the North Pole. And why does that matter? Well, it matters because it can move the ice in places that we don't want it to move. And one of them is if it moves from north to south, it goes right into the Pacific Ocean. And the Pacific Ocean is warm. And if you have a good year at the Arctic, it can turn into a new tipping point virtually within a couple of days. And that happened in 2012. So, all of this leads us to just one thing, and that is what we call the Arctic death spiral. I love that name. It brings home the message, Arctic death spiral. Well, this is the big prediction. When is the North Pole going to be ice-free? Is it going to be 2030, 2040, or is it going to be this year? We don't know. Last year, they were thinking it was going to happen, but it actually didn't because we had a really cool summer. But this year, all the cards are on the table for it to be an ice-free North Pole. It doesn't really matter. It's just more of a statement, because if it happens, then we humans have created a new ocean, the Arctic Ocean. We, as humanity, have been able to do something that we haven't seen before. So it's not something to be proud of. But all in all, why we should really think about the Arctic and why it matters is because of this. It's the reflectivity of the Arctic that is at stake. You see, normally the sun shines on ice and 80% of the beams go right back into the atmosphere, because the surface is usually white. I mean, this is science for an 8-year-old, a black car and a white car, both in the sun the whole day. You do the math, which you can't touch at the end of the day, it's the black car. White is good. White is what we need on our Earth. With so much ice being gone, particularly an Arctic Ocean that is 4,000 meters deep, that is dark, 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 you can just imagine what it will do. It warms up 3 times, 4 times, maybe even 5 times faster than an area that isn't so dark. And in the Arctic, we really start to see the effect. There, last year in 2017, the water was so warm in December, 4 degrees, all transported by the warm Gulf Stream. It was too warm, the ice couldn't form. The sun was long gone. It was dark, and yet we had an ice-free North Pole. It only started to change in January. Albedo, this is what we call it, is what we need everywhere. Albedo is what keeps our planet cool. All the ice surfaces, the glaciers in the Alps, the icecap in Greenland, the North Pole, Antarctica, all of that collectively make sure that our planet stays 16 degrees of centigrade on average. You take that away, and the Earth will warm up. It is our air conditioning. It's the air conditioning of our world. So that's why I care about that Arctic. And that's why I go back there over and over and over again to bring back home these messages and these words and to really make everybody understand, politicians, businesses, school children, you, that the Arctic is no longer a victim of climate change. It will be the driver of climate change. Now, how would that work? Well, here, real quick, all these expeditions I've done. And I know what I'm talking about. 3 of my big expeditions were 60 days. You need time on the ice to understand what is at stake, what is happening around you, so you can report about it. If I just go there for a couple of days, I wouldn't get the same understanding. And this is what the Arctic has become. Difficult, challenging. You already saw us swimming. But what about if you have to get waken up in the middle of the night because the ice is cracking underneath your tent while you're asleep? And you have exactly 10 seconds to get all your stuff and throw it on one side and hope you throw it to the right side where the rest of your team is. And then the ice breaks up and drifts apart. Or what about if you sleep in the Arctic and all of a sudden it snows, and it snows a meter, and you can't, you're tent bound, you can't move anymore because you can't dredge a sled through that much snow. So we know this. The 10 hottest years on Earth are all happen to be in the last decennium. And it's getting hotter. It's getting hotter, and the heat is not on places where we really need it. It is happening, it's concentrated in the northern hemisphere, and it's concentrated in places where there's lots of ice. Like Siberia, like northern Canada, like Alaska, like Greenland. Red is not a good color on any weather map, not even on this one. And for me, I live in British Columbia. I was on evacuation order twice last year. 11,000 fires, all spontaneous, mostly dry lightning. Lots and lots of ash in the atmosphere, lots of ash in our system. And where does it land? It lands here, on the Greenland icecap. Because if you look at a map of the world, Siberia and British Columbia are in between. And so whether the wind blows from east to west or west to east, it will land on the Greenland icecap. And this was a picture of last August. The icecap of Greenland is no longer white, it is black. And there is our science for an 8-year-old again. It will melt much faster. Why does it matter? It matters because a lack of ice means a lack of a good, solid weather system. You see, normally, that we have a jet stream that brings us weather. We all live, the majority of the people live between 45 degrees and 55 degrees. We get our weather that is brought by this famous jet stream. We all know the jet stream. If you fly to New York, on the way back it takes you about an hour and a half longer than if you fly this way. Well, this jet stream functions purely by the fact that it gets cold polar air and warm air from the equator. And these two air masses meet up, and that forms wind. And this wind brings weather, brings pressure systems, does all sorts of things for our climate. Now, the jet stream is no longer getting fed really cold polar air. It gets warmer air from the Arctic. And what does that mean? Just exactly what you see in this animation. It starts to meander. It starts to just really go up and down, big curves. And if it goes in the up way, then warm air from the equator comes in and we get really weird statistics. 21 degrees above normal in Greenland on the ice cap in the winter. Or if it swings on the other way, we get cooler polar air. It's called polar leakage in Florida, where it snows. We're starting to see extreme weather everywhere. And it can hit whenever and wherever, we don't know. So, for instance, it will hit here. The drama scenarios of California. 3 years in a drought, 1 year of excessive rain, and this year, potentially again in a drought. Or we'll see excessive rains in the Midwest of Canada and America. Or here in the Netherlands, single-cell storms, so dramatic, so violent, that we get hailstorms the size of footballs. And where we then eventually have a lot of damage in a country that can really handle weather disasters. This is one of the most populated countries in the world. 18 million people live here. What will we do if there are no trains, no buses? You've all walked around Amsterdam. It's very crowded here. Extreme weather events and the effects of it are really a problem. Meanwhile, our oceans are getting warmer too, of course. One doesn't go without the other. The atmosphere is warming up, but this is where the real challenge lies. Oceans all over the world are already about a degree warmer. They're much, much slower to warm up, but once they're warm, they really, really retain that heat. This is the picture of Hurricane Harvey, the first Category 5 hurricane last year in Texas. We all have seen this picture probably in August. It was a disastrous event, but in some ways we got lucky. Because Harvey was heading straight to land. It was heading to the town next door called Galveston. And what is in Galveston? This, ExxonMobil. So don't think for a second that extreme weather that is happening somewhere far away will not have an impact on us, because if indeed Harvey was going full force on ExxonMobil, all the refineries would have been wiped out. We would have had an ecologic disaster in the oceans. We would have no gas. We would have no petrochemical industry. We would have none of that. And what would have happened with the price of the barrel of oil? It would have gone from $62 to $350 overnight. And then we would have had a crash on Wall Street. And then everybody would have been affected by it. So it won't probably come to a surprise to see that 2017 was the most expensive year for weather-related events. Never has there been so many claims on insurances. In fact, reinsurance companies that are the buffer of other insurance companies who usually pay out these claims run out of money. There wasn't enough money to pay for all these weather events. And then, is it ironic to see that the four biggest disasters, the most cost and the highest insurance claims, all happen to be in the United States, with a government in tow who doesn't believe that climate change is human-caused. I don't believe this is a sudden graph. I think climate change is going to come on very active and very fast. It will all hit us like a giant tsunami. Already this year, every month, we hear of record-breaking months, the hottest, the coldest, the wettest. We have record after record. So one can only come to the conclusion that it is going to hit us harder and faster than we imagine. Well, we try. We had Copenhagen. It didn't happen. Then we had Paris, which is a good attempt. We all agreed that this is what we need to do. But now we're going to wait 5 years before it really got to be implemented. And the climate cannot wait 5 years. So something else needs to happen, something that needs to jumpstart this. Some courage, some guts. So somebody tells me, you need to really go and talk to Trump. It's like, no. Trump is good for America, because this is the counter effect. Initiatives, new climate congresses, such as these in California, all popping up. It will happen because people are fed up, because really, we can't wait. We don't have the time to wait for politics to implement our plan and to implement our climate agreement globally. We need to do something else. And that's why I think it is amazing that you guys are focusing on this, building a bee economy, because Wall Street is over. It's no longer talking about return on investments. It is about what creates value. Value for people, value for our planet. You all have been to Patagonia this morning. This is what is value. What a gutsy move to take out an ad in the New York Times on Black Friday, the day after Thanksgiving, with their most favorite best-selling product, the R jacket, the R2 jacket, and said, please do not buy this jacket. If you have one, you don't need two. That is so different kind of management, so different kind of running a corporation than what we see with traditional companies today. So I'm not very hopeful that that is how we're going to solve a climate crisis. I believe in people like Shackleton. If you're British, you know who he is. A famous polar explorer with really odd ideas of how he was managing his team, his dream. He was doing it because of course he wanted to go to Antarctica being the first, but also he had a vision. He didn't know how he was going to get there. He didn't know what was laying ahead of him. He just knew that he needed to have the best people in his team, and together they were able to go on this journey. So that's what I did. Since last year, I'm taking CEOs with me, big corporations. Last year, 33 CEOs of big corporations of the Netherlands, 33 people of real estate companies. And this year, I took banks and insurance companies. And together we sit on a ship and we look at the dramatic scenery of Svalbard, Spitsbergen in this case, where there are no more glaciers. So it's a free-for-all for these glaciers. They're coming in touch with the warm seawater and starting to run even faster. Seeing with your own eyes, seeing the drama from the Arctic, and make that journey from your head to your heart, and then pull into action together with people who are like-minded. Here they are. They're all CEOs of investment companies, of banks, insurance companies, those people that can make the change, those people that can really make it happen. That is what we need to be doing. And that's what you guys are doing. And the word is together, because you can't do it alone. We've never really had to deal with a problem this magnitude, let alone trying to figure it out by yourself. So for me, I'm hopeful that I can bring these people and have them experience it, seeing it with their own eyes, and then have them go home and really take these messages and try to work together into what they can do together, making statements, making changes, and then using themselves as ambassadors to go back to the corporations, to everybody that works there, and try to make them motivated and enthusiastic to make the change, is what we need to do more. Now, I understand not everybody is able to go to the Arctic. Not everybody should be going to the Arctic because it's a very precious place. But it does work. As long as you understand that the way we are doing business now is not the way forward, something needs to change, and fast. And if you have the courage, the discipline, the vision to be in front, to be a leader, who put value first instead of profit, then I think we have a chance to tackle our climate. So this is what I'm doing. I'm presenting next Tuesday our plans, our concrete plans that we made to our minister, or to our committee, our climate committee. And hopefully, we're gonna put some of them into action, into practice. So my call to you is, think out of the box. It's time. And I think with such a good delegation of young people who want to do different things, we can tackle this climate problem. If all we can do is not let it go to 3 degrees or 4 degrees, but to 1.5 degrees, that is really what we need to work on, everybody, and together. Thank you.